Churchill Island, near Phillip Island in Westernport, Victoria, has a size quite disproportionate in relation to its great historical and ecological importance. With the assistance and foresight of the Premier of Victoria, Mr. Dick Hamer, this fascinating island was purchased by the Victoria Conservation Trust for the people of Victoria. The island occupies a unique place in the history of the early settlement of Victoria and offers sanctuary to many species of water birds. It is also an important base for migrating flocks from the north. Nearly 40 species of wading birds visit Churchill Island each year between September and April. Churchill Island, close to Phillip Island in Westernport Bay, was acquired by the Victoria Conservation Trust in 1976. From the Trust's point of view, it is a most important acquisition. It is very closely associated with the state of Victoria from a historical point of view. It is the first place in Victoria where crops were planted. In fact, we believe it is also the first place where a permanent building was erected. The story of the discovery and settlement of this island began in 1798, when Surgeon George Bass, on his historic whaleboat expedition, went to examine the southern coastline. At the westward extremity, he observed a very good harbour, and he gave it the name Westernport.
The first thing we know about Churchill Island is through George Bass, who was commissioned to explore the coast of Australia from Port Jackson down to here, in the course of which he discovered Bass Strait. He explored and discovered Westernport, and then there's evidence to show that he came right up to the head of Westernport, landed here, and inscribed his name on this rock. And here is inscribed the letter B, A, S, and the other S has slipped away down there somewhere. And this memorable day was the 5th of January, 1798.
2 years later, during a voyage commissioned to prove once and for all the existence of the strait, the official landing and settlement of the island began.
In 1800, Lieutenant Grant, Royal Navy, in HMS Lady Nelson, was dispatched from England to find and explore a west to east passage between Tasmania and the mainland. He, like Bass, entered Westernport Bay and eventually landed on Churchill on the 25th of March, 1801.
Lieutenant James Grant was enchanted by the beautiful little island, and as the Lady Nelson lay at anchor in Westernport, he would no doubt have often seen the sun rise over the island. Little wonder then that he was moved to write, "I scarcely know a place I would sooner call mine than this little island." He further describes the island. It is of gradual ascent, well covered with trees and underwood. The situation of it is so pleasant and the prospects around it so agreeable that this, together with the richness of the soil and the sheltered position of the spot, made me conceive the idea that it was excellently adapted for a garden.
Before leaving England, a friend of Grant's, John Churchill, gave him a variety of seeds such as wheat, coffee, onions, and apples, inducing him, and I quote, to plant them for the future benefit of our fellow men, unquote. Little did he know that he was the precursor of a great Australian rural industry. After making a garden and planting these seeds, Grant named the island after John Churchill.
Using the timber he had cleared to make his garden, Grant built a wooden blockhouse, 24 feet by 12 feet, which he took care would remain for some years. This blockhouse was the first permanent dwelling built in the state of Victoria. The Lady Nelson returned to England, and Grant was never to see his island again. Lieutenant Murray, who succeeded to the command of the Lady Nelson, returned to Churchill Island almost a year later, and he reported that the crops had flourished, the wheat was fine, ripe and 6 feet tall. He cut down some of the wheat to feed to the swans of the island. Murray left a few days later, and for a brief interlude, Churchill Island returned to the peace it had previously known. Inevitably, though, European settlement had begun.
In the 170 years of the discovered history of Churchill Island, there are a number of interesting phases. In 1800 to 1820, the sealers came in and settled here, and where I'm standing now are the first foundations, or what's left of them, of their houses and their sheds, probably where they used to hang the seal skins.
An English migrant, Samuel Pickersgill, his wife and their 2 small children were the first family to live on Churchill Island. They arrived in 1857 and remained for 6 years. During this time, 4 more daughters were born. The first, Marion Louisa, was not only the first child born on Churchill Island, but had the distinction of being born in the hut built by Grant, or at least perhaps its renovated successor. For some reason, Samuel Pickersgill never attempted to acquire possession of the island, and in 1866 a Cornishman, John Rogers, took out the first Crown grant at a cost of £210. Both Pickersgill and Rogers had farmed the island, but in 1872 it was bought from Rogers by the man who can probably be credited with the cultivation, obvious as we see it today. He was Samuel Amos, later to become Lord Mayor of Melbourne. Amos built what is now the old part of the existing homestead. He stocked the island with hare, quail, pheasant, and a herd of imported Highland cattle. He also laid out the garden and planted the lofty pines which shade the house. In the garden is an ancient cannon, which was presented to Amos by the commander of the Shenandoah, a Confederate ship of the American Civil War. The gift was a token of gratitude for the hospitality extended to the ship and her crew by the people of Melbourne. A costly gift, in fact, to the British Empire, but that is another story. The island was owned by the Amos family for 3 generations. In 1929, after the youngest Amos's death, the island was purchased by Gerald Buckley, son of Mars Buckley and founder of the famous Melbourne store of Buckley and Nunn. In 1936, a Melbourne dentist, Dr. Harry Jenkins, bought the island from the Buckley family. He ran Hereford cattle, he further developed the pastures, and he grew passion fruit and turkeys. Dr. Jenkins had a crippled son, Edward, who was nursed by Sister Margaret Campbell. Edward predeceased his father, but Sister Campbell had developed such a love of the island that when Dr. Jenkins died in 1963, he bequeathed it to her. She renovated the house, built earlier in the century, actively farmed the island, and nourished the beautiful garden. In 1973, ill health forced her to sell Churchill Island. It was bought at auction by a Mr. Alex Classu. In 1976, with the financial backing of the Victorian government, headed by Premier Dick Hamer, Churchill Island was purchased by the Victoria Conservation Trust. The trust plans to restore the island to something close to its original state. In the years of settlement, many of the trees and underwood, which Grant described, have been cleared. Reforestation programs are well underway. Walking tracks, observation points and limited tourist facilities are also planned. The existing homestead will be further restored, and it will be maintained to house historical documents, tools, farm implements and artefacts, all dealing with this early period of Victoria's rural development. Churchill Island will be preserved forever as a sanctuary, so that the abundant species of bird life which already reside here and the migratory flocks which visit from the north may continue to exist in peace and harmony. The Victoria Conservation Trust was established by the Victorian Government through the Victoria Conservation Trust Act 1972. The Trust's responsibilities are, among other things, to encourage and assist in the preservation of areas of ecological significance, of natural interest or beauty, or historical importance. The Victoria Conservation Trust is dedicated to preserving our precious heritage, but it must have your support to succeed.